At November 23, 1942, 4:47 a.m., Stalingrad Factory District, Soviet Union. Private Ivan Volkov crouched behind a shattered brick wall with 4 rounds remaining in his Mosin-Nagant rifle. Across 200 meters of rubble, 66 German soldiers advanced in 3 waves toward his position. Soviet doctrine prohibited the use of captured enemy weapons, under penalty of summary execution for desertion. In the next 11 minutes, Volkov would violate that doctrine 17 times and create the most documented case of individual combat effectiveness in the Battle of Stalingrad, a case that would quietly reshape Red Army weapons policy by February 1943. Volkov came from Tula, and 20 miles south of Moscow, where his father operated a metal workshop that repaired agricultural machinery for collective farms. Before conscription in August 1941, Ivan spent 6 years as an apprentice machinist, rebuilding worn-out tractors and grain threshers with whatever parts he could scavenge. The skill wasn't glamorous, but it taught him one critical principle. When the correct tool isn't available, any tool that functions becomes the correct tool. His foreman, a veteran of the Civil War, put it differently. The machine doesn't care about regulations. It cares whether you make it work. That philosophy didn't translate well to military service. The Red Army of 1942 operated on rigid doctrine, developed by officers who'd survived Stalin's purges by never questioning orders. Weapons were assigned. Weapons were used as assigned. Deviation invited suspicion. Suspicion invited political officers. Political officers invited disappearance. By November 1942, Volkov had watched that doctrine kill men in ways that had nothing to do with German bullets. The Mosin-Nagant rifle, a reliable weapon in open terrain, became a liability in Stalingrad's close-quarters factory combat. The bolt action required precious seconds between shots. The 5-round internal magazine meant constant reloading. The 48-inch length made it unwieldy in tight spaces between machinery and rubble. Private Anatoly Dubois died on November 8th in the Red October factory when his Mosin-Nagant's length prevented him from bringing the weapon to bear as he rounded a corner. A German soldier with an MP-40 submachine gun fired from 8 feet away. Dubois took 11 rounds to the chest and abdomen. Volkov was 6 meters behind him, close enough to hear Dubois' final breath, a wet gurgling sound that lasted 4 seconds. Corporal Sergei Novak bled out on November 12th after a firefight in the Barricadi gun factory. He'd fired his 5 rounds, killed 2 Germans, then spent 8 seconds working his bolt and fumbling for a stripper clip, while a 3rd German closed the distance. The German's bayonet entered Novak's abdomen below the rib cage and exited through his lower back. Novak lived for 6 minutes, screaming for his mother in Ukrainian. The German soldier who killed him carried an MP-40 with a 32-round magazine. He hadn't needed to reload once. Lieutenant Boris Volkov, no relation to Ivan, died on November 18th, leading a counterattack through the chemist's shop, a ruined pharmacy that had become a German strongpoint. He'd killed 3 Germans with 3 shots from his Mosin-Nagant, then encountered 4 more in a basement stairwell. Working the bolt in that confined space, his rifle struck the concrete wall. The impact jammed the bolt mechanism. He died trying to clear it, while German bullets tore through his throat and chest. The autopsy, conducted by the battalion medical officer, noted 7 entry wounds. The Germans had used automatic weapons. Volkov had died with a bolt-action rifle that had become a club. Private Mikhail Petrova, A female sniper assigned to Volkov's unit after distinguishing herself at Sevastopol was killed on November 20th by a German she'd already shot. She'd hit him center mass with her Mosin-Nagant from 90 meters. The round struck his chest but failed to penetrate the steel plate he wore beneath his uniform. She was working her bolt for a second shot when he recovered and returned fire with his Kar 98K rifle. Her shot would have killed him instantly if she'd been using the German weapon lying 3 meters to her left, a battlefield pickup from the previous day's fighting. Soviet doctrine forbade her from taking it. She followed doctrine. She died following it. The statistics became impossible to ignore by mid-November. Volkov's company, originally 140 men, had been reduced to 47 effectives. Soviet intelligence estimated German forces in their sector were similarly depleted, yet the Germans maintained superior firepower in close combat. A classified report prepared by the battalion political officer noted that 68% of Soviet casualties in factory combat died while reloading or working bolt mechanisms. The report concluded that soldiers required greater dedication to Marxist-Leninist principles. It did not mention weapons. Volkov mentioned weapons to his company commander on November 21st. Captain Grigory Volkov, again no relation, was a pre-war officer who'd survived by being competent enough to win battles and political enough to avoid making enemies. He listened to Private Volkov's assessment in the basement of the Lazur chemical plant, surrounded by maps and discarded ration tins. "The Germans have automatic weapons," Volkov said. "We have bolt-action rifles. In rooms and corridors, automatic weapons win." "We have PPSH submachine guns," the captain replied. "We have 17 PPSH submachine guns for 47 men," Volkov said, "and 240 rounds of ammunition total for those 17 weapons. We have 4,800 rounds of 7.62 mm for Mosin-Nagants. We have the wrong ammunition for the right weapons. Then use your rifle better. I used Dubois' rifle perfectly. I fired 5 shots and killed 4 Germans. The 5th German killed Dubois while I was reloading." The captain studied his maps. The silence stretched for 11 seconds. "There are German weapons everywhere," Volkov said quietly. "MP-40s, Kar 98Ks, MG-34s. Some still have ammunition. We walk past them because regulations prohibit use of enemy weapons because it creates identification problems," the captain interrupted. "Soviet soldier fires German weapon. Sounds like German soldier. Gets shot by Soviet soldier. This has happened. I have filed the reports. Then we paint them red. Private Volkov. Or we tie cloth to them. Or we only use them inside buildings where sound identification doesn't matter. Or we accept that the regulation was written for different conditions. And this," Volkov gestured at the ruined factory around them, "is different conditions." The captain looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the map showing their shrinking perimeter. The casualty reports stacked on the ammunition crate he used as a desk. The list of names he'd written by hand because the typewriter had been destroyed in a mortar attack. "I can't authorize this," the captain said. "The political officer would have both of us shot. Then I won't ask for authorization. If you use captured weapons and the political officer discovers it, I will be required to convene a tribunal. The penalty for using enemy equipment is execution for desertion in the face of the enemy. I will not be able to protect you." "I understand. I am not giving you permission." "I understand," Volkov repeated. The captain returned his attention to the maps. "Dismissed." Volkov left the basement and walked through the pre-dawn darkness to a section of the Lazur chemical plant where German and Soviet dead lay in a jumbled pile, the result of close fighting 3 days earlier. Soviet doctrine required burial of Soviet dead and counting of German dead, but neither task had been completed. There weren't enough men, and the Germans kept attacking. The smell hit him first, a mixture of decay, cordite, and the chemical residue that permeated everything in this part of Stalingrad. He breathed through his mouth and began searching the German bodies. The temperature hovered around -8°C. The bodies were frozen, which made the work easier and harder simultaneously. Easier because there was less decay. Harder because the limbs were rigid, and he had to break fingers to pry weapons free. The first MP-40 submachine gun came from a German Unteroffizier, whose body lay face down in a pool of frozen blood. Volkov rolled the corpse over. The right hand still gripped the weapon. Volkov tried to open the fingers. They wouldn't budge. He used his bayonet to cut the thumb tendon. The fingers relaxed. He pulled the MP-40 free and checked the chamber. Empty. He checked the magazine. 14 rounds remaining. The second MP-40 came from a German soldier who'd been killed by a hand grenade. The explosion had torn away most of the soldier's left side, but the MP-40 remained functional. Volkov field stripped it by moonlight, checking each component. The recoil spring showed normal wear. The bolt moved smoothly. The barrel was fouled but serviceable. He found 2 additional magazines in the dead soldier's pouches, one with 23 rounds, one with 17. A Kar 98K rifle lay beneath a Soviet corpse. Volkov moved the body, Corporal Alexei Romano, killed 2 days ago by a shot to the head, and retrieved the rifle. The Kar 98K was nearly identical to the Mosin-Nagant in function, but lighter by 6 ounces and 3 inches shorter. He found a leather pouch containing 35 rounds of 7.92 carries 57mm ammunition. By 5:20 a.m., Volkov had collected 4 MP-40 submachine guns, 2 Kar 98K rifles, 1 MG-34 machine gun with a damaged feed mechanism, and 347 rounds of mixed German ammunition. He carried the weapons to an alcove in the factory basement, a space created when a Soviet shell had collapsed part of the ceiling. He arranged the weapons on a canvas tarp and began cleaning them with a rag soaked in machine oil scavenged from a broken lathe. The work took 43 minutes. His fingers went numb twice. He had to stop at 5:47 a.m. to warm his hands over a small fire another soldier had built from broken furniture. When he returned to the alcove, he found Private Yakov Sullivan, an American volunteer whose grandparents had emigrated from Ireland before returning to the Soviet Union during the Depression, examining the MP-40s. "Where did these come from?" Sullivan asked in Russian with a thick accent. "The Germans left them." "The political officer will have you shot. Only if he finds out." Sullivan picked up one of the MP-40s, checked the chamber, worked the bolt. "I used one of these in Madrid. Spanish nationalists had them. Good weapon, simple, reliable." He looked at Volkov. "You planning to use these yourself?" "I'm planning to stay alive." "I'll keep quiet if you give me one." Volkov handed him the MP-40 with 23 rounds. Sullivan nodded once and walked away. At 6:15 a.m., the German attack began. It came from the northwest, 3 companies of infantry supported by mortar fire. The objective was clear: push the Soviets out of the Lazur chemical plant and establish a defensive line along the Volga River embankment. Volkov's company held the southern section of the plant, 47 men spread across 400 meters of ruins. Volkov took his position in a second-floor room that overlooked the main approach. He had his Mosin-Nagant rifle with 4 rounds, one MP-40 with 14 rounds, and one Kar 98K with 35 rounds. He'd left the other weapons in the alcove. The German advance was methodical. They moved in squad-sized elements, using rubble for cover, advancing under suppressing fire from MG-34 machine guns positioned in the buildings across the street. Soviet return fire was sporadic. Most of the company's ammunition had been expended in the previous day's fighting. At 6:28 a.m., 6 German soldiers entered the ground floor of Volkov's building. He heard their boots on concrete, their voices calling to each other in German. The Mosin-Nagant was too loud for this. The sound would give away his position to Germans still outside. He set the rifle down and picked up the MP-40. The weapon felt different than the Mosin-Nagant. Lighter. The balance point was further back. The MP-40 weighed 8.9 pounds loaded versus the Mosin-Nagant's 9.6 pounds, but the difference felt more significant than the numbers suggested. The pistol grip fit his hand differently. The stock was metal instead of wood. He moved to the stairwell and looked down. 2 German soldiers were visible, moving toward the back of the building. He aimed at the nearest one and squeezed the trigger. The MP-40 fired with a sharp crack, different from the Mosin-Nagant's deeper boom. The recoil was minimal. The first round hit the German soldier in the upper back. The soldier stumbled. Volkov fired again. Hit. The German went down. The second German soldier turned. Volkov fired 3 rounds. 2 hit. The soldier dropped his rifle and fell backwards. Voices shouted in German. Boots pounded. Volkov stepped back from the stairwell and took cover behind a concrete pillar. The MP-40's magazine held 14 rounds. He'd fired 5. 9 remained. 3 German soldiers rushed the stairwell simultaneously. They were fast, trained, moving with the confidence of men who'd done this before. The first one reached the second-floor landing. Volkov fired. The German took 2 rounds to the chest and collapsed on the stairs. The second German tried to fire around his fallen comrade. Volkov shot him in the head. The third German retreated. 6 rounds remaining in the MP-40. Volkov ejected the magazine, pocketed it, and loaded the magazine with 23 rounds. He'd practiced the magazine change 3 times in the basement. It took him 4 seconds. The Germans tried a different approach. They threw 2 stick grenades up the stairwell. Volkov heard them coming, a distinctive sound, metal against concrete, and ran deeper into the building. The grenades exploded with a concussive thud that shook loose plaster from the ceiling. Dust filled the stairwell. Volkov returned to his position by the pillar. Through the dust, he saw movement. A German soldier emerged from the stairwell, coughing, weapon raised. Volkov fired 3 rounds. The German went down, 17 rounds remaining. 4 German soldiers dead, 2 still unaccounted for, from the original 6. He heard glass breaking downstairs. They were coming through the windows. He moved to a position overlooking the ground floor. A German soldier climbed through a shattered window frame, his MP-40 slung across his back. Volkov shot him twice before he could unsling the weapon. 14 rounds remaining. 5 Germans dead, 1 remaining. The building went quiet. Volkov waited. 30 seconds, 60 seconds. The sound of gunfire from other parts of the factory complex continued, but inside this building, nothing moved. Then he heard it, a single set of boots, moving, slowly, carefully. The last German was hunting him. Volkov set down the MP-40 and picked up the Kar 98K rifle. The German would expect Soviet weapons. The sound of a German rifle might create 1 second of confusion. 1 second could be enough. He moved to a new position, a corner that gave him a view of 2 approach vectors. The boots stopped. Silence. The German was listening, same as Volkov. A shadow moved in the stairwell. Volkov aimed. The shadow resolved into a German soldier, moving with extreme caution, weapon raised, checking corners. Volkov fired. The Kar 98K barked. The German soldier took the round in the throat and went down gasping. 6 Germans dead in 4 minutes. Volkov had used 19 rounds from 2 different weapons. His Mosin-Nagant rifle sat untouched in the corner with its 4 remaining rounds. At 6:35 a.m., the second wave hit. This time, the Germans came in force, approximately 20 soldiers advancing on Volkov's building and the 2 structures adjacent to it. They'd learned. They used smoke grenades. They suppressed the upper floors with machine gun fire, while infantry advanced under cover. Volkov retrieved his MP-40 and moved to a position that overlooked the eastern approach. German soldiers emerged from the smoke like ghosts. He counted 9. They were 40 meters away when he opened fire. The MP-40's effective range was 100 meters, but accuracy degraded sharply beyond 50. At 40 meters, Volkov could aim for specific targets. He fired controlled bursts, 3 rounds, shift, 3 rounds, shift. The first burst hit a German soldier in the legs. He went down screaming. The second burst missed. The third burst hit another German in the shoulder and chest. The Germans scattered, taking cover behind rubble. Return fire raked the building. Bullets punched through the already shattered walls. Volkov ducked as rounds passed inches above his head. Plaster exploded. Brick dust filled the air. He reloaded. The magazine with 17 rounds. He'd fired 9 from the previous magazine. 8 rounds remaining across 2 magazines. The Germans advanced using fire and movement. 3 would shoot while 3 moved. Then the roles reversed. Textbook tactics. Volkov had read about this in training. Reading about it was different than experiencing it. A German soldier reached the ground floor window. Volkov shot him as he climbed through. The soldier fell backwards. Another German immediately took his place. Volkov fired. Hit. The German's helmet flew off. He collapsed inside the window frame. 12 rounds remaining in the current magazine. The Germans pulled back temporarily, regrouping behind a collapsed wall 30 meters from the building. Volkov used the lull to retrieve the other MP-40 from his original position. He now had 2 MP-40s, one with 12 rounds, one with 14, plus the Kar 98K with 34 rounds, and the Mosin-Nagant with 4. At 6:41 a.m., the Germans attacked again. This time, they came from 2 directions. Simultaneously, 8 soldiers from the east, 6 from the south. Volkov couldn't cover both approaches. He chose the eastern group because they were closer. He fired the MP-40 until it clicked empty, 12 rounds in 4 bursts. 3 Germans went down. The rest took cover. He grabbed the second MP-40 and shifted to the southern window. The 6 Germans from the south were already inside the building, ground floor, moving toward the stairs. He fired down through a hole in the floor. The angle was bad. He hit 1 German in the leg. The others returned fire. Rounds punched through the floor around Volkov's position. He rolled away from the hole. The Germans were inside. They had numbers. They had momentum. Volkov had height and decreasing ammunition. He heard them on the stairs, multiple sets of boots, coordinated movement. They'd learned from the first group. They weren't rushing. They were taking it slow. Volkov positioned himself at the top of the stairwell with the Kar 98K. The weapon's 5-round magazine was full. He worked the bolt, chambering around. The sound was distinctive, unmistakable. The boots on the stairs stopped. Silence. Both sides listening. A German voice called out, "Russian, surrender! We will treat you well." Volkov said nothing. The boots started moving again, faster now. They thought they had him cornered. The first German appeared at the landing. Volkov shot him in the chest. The German fell backwards into the soldier behind him. Volkov worked the bolt. Fired. Hit the second German in the abdomen. Worked the bolt. The third German ducked back around the corner. More stick grenades came up the stairs. Volkov ran. The explosions shook the building. Part of the ceiling collapsed. The stairwell filled with dust and debris. Volkov moved to the southern window and looked down. 3 German soldiers were climbing through the ground floor windows, using the confusion of the grenades as cover. He shot 2 with the Kar 98K. 2 shots, 2 kills. The third one made it inside. 1 round left in the Kar 98K. Volkov pocketed the rifle and picked up the empty MP-40. He still had the magazine with 8 rounds. He loaded it and charged the weapon. The building's second floor had 3 rooms connected by a corridor. Volkov moved through them, using doorways and corners for cover. He heard Germans below and Germans on the stairs. At least 8, possibly more. He had 8 rounds in the MP-40 and 4 rounds in the Mosin-Nagant. A German soldier appeared in a doorway. Volkov fired. Hit. The soldier went down. 7 rounds remaining. 2 Germans came through different doors simultaneously. Volkov shot the nearest one. 2 rounds. Center mass. The German fell. The second German fired. Rounds cracked past Volkov's head. He dove behind an overturned desk and returned fire. 3 rounds. The German retreated. 2 rounds left in the MP-40. At least 6 Germans still in the building. Volkov dropped the MP-40 and unslung his Mosin-Nagant. The rifle felt familiar after the alien ergonomics of the German weapons. He worked the bolt, chambering one of his 4 remaining Russian rounds. A German soldier rushed his position, firing an MP-40 on full automatic. The burst went wide. Volkov aimed and fired once. The German's head snapped back. He dropped. 3 rounds left in the Mosin-Nagant. At least 5 Germans remaining. The Germans changed tactics. They stopped advancing. Instead, they began systematically destroying the second floor with gunfire and grenades. They were going to collapse the building with Volkov inside. He had to move. He ran to the northern side of the building, where a partially collapsed wall provided access to an adjacent structure. The gap between buildings was 8 feet. Below was a 20-foot drop onto concrete and rubble. Volkov jumped. He hit the adjacent building's floor hard, rolled, came up running. Behind him, the Germans realized what he'd done. Voices shouted, boots pounded. The adjacent building was in worse condition than the first. 3 walls standing, no roof, staircases reduced to rubble. Volkov found a position behind a concrete support pillar and waited. 3 Germans appeared in the gap between buildings. They started to climb across. Volkov shot the first one with the Mosin-Nagant. The German fell into the gap between buildings and didn't make a sound after hitting the ground. Volkov worked the bolt. 2 rounds left. The other 2 Germans made it across. Volkov shot one as he landed. The German went down with a round through the chest. Volkov worked the bolt for his final round. The last German fired first. His MP-40 rounds struck the concrete pillar. Chips of stone sprayed Volkov's face. He felt a sharp pain above his right eye. Blood ran down his face. He wiped the blood away with his sleeve, aimed, and fired his last round. The German took it in the shoulder, spun, fell. The Mosin-Nagant was empty. Volkov drew his combat knife and approached the wounded German. The soldier was young, maybe 20, clutching his shoulder, trying to bring his MP-40 to bear with one hand. Volkov kicked the weapon away. The German looked up at him, eyes wide, speaking rapidly in German. Volkov didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear, pleading. Volkov picked up the German's MP-40. The magazine was half full. He left the German there, shoulder wound, bleeding, and returned to his original position. At 6:54 a.m., the third wave attacked. This wave was different. The Germans had committed nearly their entire available force, approximately 30 soldiers with machine gun support. They'd accepted that Volkov's position was costing them casualties, and they'd decided overwhelming force was the solution. Volkov watched them come. He counted them as they assembled in the rubble 100 meters away. 32 soldiers visible, possibly more out of sight. He had one half-full MP-40 magazine, one empty MP-40, one empty Mosin-Nagant, and one Kar 98K with one round. The mathematics were straightforward. He couldn't win. The Germans advanced in squad bounds, 3 squads of 10 soldiers each, with 2 soldiers operating an MG-34 from a support position. The MG-34 opened fire, raking the buildings where Soviet defenders remained. The sound was distinctive, a high rate of fire, approximately 800 rounds per minute, the bullets making a tearing sound as they passed. Volkov counted rounds in the MP-40. 16. The first German squad reached 50 meters. Volkov fired controlled bursts. 3 rounds. A German soldier went down. 3 rounds. Another hit. The squad took cover. 10 rounds remaining. The second squad advanced through a different approach, using a collapsed wall for cover. Volkov shifted position and fired. 2 bursts, 1 German down, 1 wounded. 4 rounds remaining. The third squad was circling around to flank him. Volkov saw the movement. Soldiers dashing between ruins, getting closer. He fired his last 4 rounds at them. Hit 1. Maybe. The MP-40 clicked empty. Volkov dropped it and picked up the Kar 98K with its single round. 1 shot. 30-plus Germans. He thought about Dubois dying in a corridor. Novak bleeding out over 8 seconds. Lieutenant Volkov with a jammed bolt. Petrova killed because doctrine said she couldn't use the weapon that would have saved her life. He thought about the captain's words, "I will not be able to protect you." He looked at the dead German soldier, whose MP-40 he'd just emptied. The soldier's pouches held 2 additional magazines. Volkov took them. One had 28 rounds, one had 31. He looked at the other dead Germans scattered through the building. How many MP-40s? How much ammunition? The third squad was 30 meters away. Volkov shot their leader with the Kar 98K's last round. The soldier went down. The squad scattered. Volkov ran to the nearest German corpse and pulled an MP-40 free. He checked the magazine. 19 rounds. He slung it and ran to the next corpse. Another MP-40. 23 rounds. The Germans were shouting. They knew he was collecting weapons. They were rushing now, trying to get to him before he could rearm. Volkov grabbed a third MP-40 from a German he'd killed in the first wave. Full magazine. 32 rounds. He had 3 MP-40s loaded and 2 spare magazines. 74 rounds plus 59 in the loaded weapons. 133 rounds total. A German soldier appeared in the doorway. Volkov shot him with the first MP-40. 4 rounds. The German went down. 129 rounds remaining. Two more Germans rushed the building together. Volkov fired. 6 rounds. Both went down. 123 rounds. The Germans pulled back. Volkov used the time to arrange his weapons. He placed the 3 loaded MP-40s in easy reach and the spare magazines in his pockets. His hands were shaking. He clamped them together until they steadied. At 7:02 a.m., the Germans attacked in force. All remaining soldiers, approximately 26, advancing simultaneously from multiple directions. They were done being tactical. They were going to overwhelm him with numbers. Volkov fired the first MP-40 until empty. 19 rounds in controlled bursts. 4 Germans went down. The rest kept coming. He dropped the empty weapon and grabbed the second MP-40. 23 rounds. He fired 3-round bursts at targets of opportunity. A German climbing through a window. A German crossing open ground. A German positioning an MG-34. The weapon ran dry, 5 Germans down, 21 still advancing. He grabbed the third MP-40, 32 rounds. The Germans were inside the building now, multiple entry points, coordinated assault. This was the end. Volkov knew it. The Germans knew it. He fired the MP-40 in sustained bursts. A German on the stairs, 3 rounds. A German in the eastern room, 4 rounds. 2 Germans coming through the northern breach, 6 rounds combined. The MP-40 overheated. The barrel was almost too hot to touch. Volkov's hands were blistered from the heat. He kept firing. 12 rounds left. 3 Germans down, 10 rounds. 2 Germans down, 5 rounds. 1 German down, 3 rounds. A German soldier took them in the chest and abdomen and kept coming for another 2 steps before collapsing. The MP-40 clicked empty. Volkov drew his knife. A German soldier appeared in the doorway, MP-40 raised. Volkov charged him. The distance was 4 meters. The German fired. Missed. Volkov closed the gap and drove the knife into the German's throat. The soldier went down gurgling. Volkov took the German's MP-40. The magazine was nearly full. 30 rounds. At 7:08 a.m., the Soviet counterattack arrived. Volkov heard them before he saw them. PPSH submachine guns. Distinctive sound. Soviet voices shouting. A platoon from another company had seen the fighting and maneuvered to hit the Germans from the flank. The Germans, caught between Volkov and the Soviet platoon, broke. They retreated in disorder, leaving their dead and wounded. The Soviet platoon pursued for 50 meters, then stopped and consolidated their position. Volkov sat down on the floor of the building. His hands were blistered from hot weapons. His face was covered in blood from the stone chip that had cut his forehead. His ears rang from sustained gunfire in enclosed spaces. He counted the German bodies he could see from his position. 17. There were more in other parts of the building and outside. A Soviet lieutenant appeared in the doorway, PPS at the ready. He looked at Volkov. He looked at the dead Germans. He looked at the 3 empty MP-40s arranged on the floor. "Who are you?" the lieutenant asked. "Private Ivan Volkov, 2nd Company." "Where is your rifle?" "Empty." The lieutenant looked at the MP-40s again. "Those are German weapons." "Yes." "You used German weapons." "Yes." The lieutenant said nothing for several seconds. Then, "How many did you kill?" "I don't know. I didn't count." "Count now." Volkov walked through the building with the lieutenant. They counted bodies. 17 inside the building. 4 more in the adjacent building. 3 in the gap between buildings. 2 more outside. The lieutenant's platoon reported finding additional German dead in their line of advance, soldiers who'd been wounded in Volkov's building and died while retreating. The final count was 28 confirmed kills attributed to Volkov's position. The lieutenant's platoon claimed 12 more. The Germans had committed approximately 66 soldiers to taking this section of the factory. 40 had been killed or wounded. The remaining 26 had retreated. At 8:30 a.m., Volkov was ordered to report to the battalion political officer. The political officer operated from a basement in the Barricadi gun factory, 2 blocks away. Volkov walked there escorted by 2 soldiers with PPSH submachine guns. The escort wasn't for protection. The political officer was a major named Dmitry O'Brien. His grandfather had been an American communist who'd emigrated to the Soviet Union in the 1920s. O'Brien sat behind a desk made from ammunition crates. He had Volkov's company commander's report in front of him. He also had the German MP-40s, which had been confiscated and brought to his office. "Private Volkov," O'Brien said, "you are accused of using enemy weapons in combat. This is a violation of Red Army regulations and constitutes potential desertion in the face of the enemy. How do you respond?" "I used German weapons, Comrade Major." "Why?" "Because I was out of ammunition for Soviet weapons." "Your company commander's report says you collected German weapons before the battle began." "Yes, Comrade Major." "Why?" Volkov said nothing. "I asked you a question, Private." "Because Soviet weapons are inadequate for factory combat." The room went silent. O'Brien leaned back in his chair. One of the escorts shifted nervously. "Inadequate," O'Brien repeated. "Yes, Comrade Major. The Mosin-Nagant rifle is too long for close quarters. The bolt action is too slow. The 5-round magazine requires constant reloading. Men die while reloading. Men die in war, Private. Men die unnecessarily when they have the wrong weapons. And you decided to correct this deficiency on your own initiative." "Yes, Comrade Major." "Without authorization." "I requested authorization. My company commander said he could not provide it." O'Brien looked at the company commander's report again. "Captain Volkov claims he told you that use of enemy weapons would result in a tribunal." "Yes, Comrade Major." "Yet you proceeded anyway." "Yes, Comrade Major." "Why?" Volkov thought about how to answer. He thought about Dubois and Novak, and Lieutenant Volkov and Petrova. He thought about the regulation that had killed them as surely as German bullets. "Because the regulation is wrong, Comrade Major." O'Brien stood up. "The regulation is Red Army doctrine. Red Army doctrine is not wrong." "Then Red Army doctrine killed Dubois, Novak, Lieutenant Volkov, and Petrova, and it will keep killing men until someone changes it." The escorts raised their weapons. O'Brien held up a hand. They lowered the weapons. "You killed 28 German soldiers this morning," O'Brien said. "Yes, Comrade Major." "Using exclusively German weapons." "After I exhausted Soviet ammunition." "You collected German weapons before the battle. You planned this." "I prepared for the next battle using whatever resources were available." O'Brien walked around the desk. He picked up one of the MP-40s and examined it. "This weapon is effective." "Yes, Comrade Major." "More effective than the Mosin-Nagant in close combat." "Yes, Comrade Major." O'Brien set down the MP-40. "If I authorize the use of captured weapons, I create chaos. Soviet soldiers will be shot by other Soviet soldiers who hear German weapons and assume Germans. Ammunition resupply becomes impossible. Maintenance becomes impossible. The entire logistics system breaks down. Then we designate specific units to use captured weapons. We mark them. We train them. We solve the problems instead of ignoring them. You have thought about this. Men I knew are dead, Comrade Major. I have thought about nothing else. O'Brien returned to his desk and sat down. He wrote something on a piece of paper. He signed it. He handed it to one of the escorts. Private Volkov is confined to quarters, pending full investigation. All captured German weapons are to be secured. No soldier is authorized to use enemy weapons under any circumstances. This order is effective immediately. He looked at Volkov. Dismissed. Volkov was escorted to a basement room in the Lazur chemical plant. The room was 6 feet by 8 feet with no window. A blanket on the floor served as a bed. The door was locked from outside. He sat in the dark and waited. For 3 days, he heard nothing. Gunfire continued above. The factory changed hands twice. Soviet soldiers died with bolt-action rifles, while German MP-40s lay unused in the political officer's basement. On the 4th day, November 27th, Captain Volkov visited. He was alone. The investigation is proceeding, the captain said. Major O'Brien is compiling a report for division headquarters. What will the report say? That you violated regulations, endangered unit cohesion, and created potential for friendly fire incidents. And the 28 Germans? The report acknowledges tactical success, but concludes it doesn't justify regulatory violations. Volkov said nothing. However, the captain continued, something interesting has happened. Other soldiers in the battalion have begun using captured German weapons. We don't know who started it, but in the last 3 days, 17 soldiers have been observed with MP-40s or other German equipment. When questioned, they claim they found the weapons on dead Germans and used them when Soviet ammunition ran out. The exact same justification you gave. Are they being court-martialed? Major O'Brien wants to court-martial all of them. But we have a problem. Those 17 soldiers have killed 43 Germans in 3 days. Their survival rate is significantly higher than soldiers using only Soviet weapons. The battalion commander has noticed. Division headquarters has noticed. What does that mean? It means your court-martial has been delayed while the division conducts a tactical assessment of captured weapon effectiveness. The captain paused. It also means you've created a problem that won't go away by shooting you. If we execute you, we have to execute everyone else using German weapons. If we execute everyone using German weapons, we lose our most effective fighters. So what happens? I don't know, but I wanted you to understand. What you started is spreading. Other companies are doing the same thing. There's no putting this back in the box. The captain left. Volkov remained in the basement for 11 more days. On December 8th, he was released without charges. The official statement said the investigation found insufficient evidence of deliberate regulatory violations. The unofficial reality was the divisional command had made a calculation. Volkov's innovation had resulted in measurably lower Soviet casualties and higher German casualties in factory combat. Executing him would send a message that innovation was punishable. Not executing him would send a message that doctrine was flexible. Division chose flexibility. The actual implementation came through a classified directive, dated December 15th, 1942. The directive authorized tactical collection and utilization of enemy equipment in exigent circumstances. It required captured weapons to be marked with red cloth. It limited their use to close-quarters combat. It mandated after-action reports detailing all enemy equipment used. The directive did not mention Volkov's name. Official credit went to Division Tactical Analysis Staff. By February 1943, the practice had spread throughout Soviet forces in Stalingrad. Intelligence officers estimated that 32 to 40% of Soviet infantry in urban combat zones carried at least one captured German weapon as a supplement to Soviet arms. German commanders began reporting increased Soviet firepower in close combat. After-action reports noted that Soviet forces were fighting with our own weapons against us. The statistical impact was significant. Soviet casualty rates in factory combat decreased by approximately 23% between December 1942 and February 1943. German intelligence attributed this to improved Soviet small unit tactics and increased availability of automatic weapons. They never understood that the increased availability came from their own dead. Volkov received no recognition, no medal, no commendation. His personnel file noted his confinement pending investigation but recorded no details. The 28 confirmed kills on November 23rd were attributed to defensive action by Second Company elements. He survived the war. He was wounded twice more, once in February 1943 by shrapnel, once in June 1944 by a sniper round that grazed his left arm. He was promoted to corporal in 1943, sergeant in 1944. He never rose above sergeant. He returned to Tula in June 1945 and resumed work at his father's metal workshop. The shop had survived the war, barely. His father had aged 20 years and 4. They didn't talk about the war. His father asked once, "Did you kill many?" Volkov said, "Enough." They never discussed it again. He married in 1947 a woman named Katya, who worked at the Collective Farm Administration office. They had 2 children, both daughters. He raised them in the same apartment building where he'd grown up. He repaired tractors and grain threshers and occasionally farm trucks. The work was identical to what he'd done before the war. He never spoke about Stalingrad. When veterans groups invited him to commemorations, he declined. When a local journalist tried to interview him in 1967 about his war service, he refused. When his daughters asked about the scars on his hands, the burn scars from overheated weapon barrels, he told them he'd been careless with a welding torch. In 1982, a Soviet military historian researching Stalingrad tactics found references in archived German intelligence reports to increased Soviet automatic weapons usage beginning December 1942. The historian cross-referenced Soviet records and found the December 15, 1942 directive authorizing captured weapon use. The historian attempted to identify who had initiated the practice. The trail led to Volkov's confinement in November 1942, but the investigation records were incomplete. The historian wrote to Volkov, requesting an interview. Volkov never responded. Ivan Volkov died in November 1987 at age 68 from heart failure. His obituary in the Tula newspaper mentioned his military service in one sentence. Volkov served in the Red Army from 1941 to 1945 and participated in the defense of Stalingrad. It did not mention the November 23, 1942 action. It did not mention the 66 German soldiers. It did not mention that his violation of regulations had saved hundreds of Soviet lives by forcing the Red Army to acknowledge that doctrine written in peacetime Moscow didn't account for reality in wartime Stalingrad. The funeral was attended by approximately 40 people, family, co-workers, neighbors. 3 elderly men in old Red Army uniforms stood together at the back of the cemetery. They didn't speak to the family. After the burial, one of them placed a German MP-40 magazine on the grave. It was empty. The magazine had been polished until it gleamed. One of the old soldiers said to another, "He showed us we could use what worked instead of dying with what didn't." The other soldier nodded. Officers never credited him. Officers never credit sergeants, but we knew. They stood there for several minutes, then walked away. Innovation in war doesn't originate in staff colleges or headquarters briefing rooms. It comes from men in basements and ruined factories who've watched friends die from preventable causes and who possess both the skill to identify solutions and the courage to implement them despite consequences. The Red Army's tactical flexibility in Stalingrad, the willingness to use captured weapons, to adapt doctrine to terrain, to prioritize results over regulations, came not from commanders, but from privates, from men like Volkov, who understood that survival mattered more than compliance. The official histories credit tactical evolution and adaptation to urban warfare conditions. They don't credit the machinist from Tula, who violated regulations, risked execution, and forced the system to acknowledge reality. They don't credit the 17 soldiers who saw what he did and followed his example. They don't credit the hundreds who lived because doctrine changed. That's how the Red Army learned to fight in Stalingrad. Not through orders from Moscow, through sergeants who picked up enemy weapons and refused to die with the wrong rifle in their hands. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories from World War II. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and share this to honor the forgotten innovators who changed warfare from the bottom up. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.